But thanks, everybody. I'm Manny Fernandez. I'm the Director of Product Management here at HYCU. The focus of the session today, I really want to talk about an angle that usually gets ignored, right? There's always going to be an index of focus on preventing attacks, on preventing data loss, on all of these areas around stopping things. But what happens when somebody actually gets through? What happens when somebody messes up, right? There's a recovery that needs to take place. So the focus that I want to have today on today's discussion is really how do we protect our data, our applications, our workloads, regardless of where they are, whether they are SaaS applications like Atlassian, specific microservices like AWS, for example, DynamoDB, RDS, or even PaaS applications, something like Terraform or Kubernetes Engine as well. But what I want to challenge everybody today is really to understand a myth that I see every single time I talk to a CISO or a VP of IT or a CIO. And the myth is, how many SaaS applications do you think you have in your organization? Every single time I have this conversation, by the end of the call, by the end of the discovery, we find dozens more of applications than somebody has. So what does it actually mean? Well, and I guarantee you, everybody on this call, you have more SaaS applications than you think. When we first think about SaaS, everyone thinks about relative to their department or the thing that they use. And you always hear some of the big ones, right? Like AWS or another public cloud. Oh, yes, we're using Salesforce. Yes, we're using Microsoft 365. But guess what? The average organization has over 200 SaaS applications. And when I say average organization, I mean the average mid-size organization. 70% of those are actually paid for and sponsored outside of IT. So think about it. If you're in IT, if you're on the engineering side, you're only seeing a fraction of the total applications that exist within your organization. But guess what? All of those applications are equally as critical. And at HYCU, we are an organization that's growing rapidly. We have over 300 employees. And even at our size, we have over 70 SaaS applications ourselves. And we went and we performed an actual experiment when we took a look at all of the SaaS applications that we're using, and we sent them all an email asking them, dear SaaS app, what happens if we accidentally delete a project, an item, an object, or something within your organization? Every single one of them responded saying, look, we are responsible for data at the system level. We are not responsible for data at the tenant level. If you delete something, if it's corrupted, even if it's encrypted from a ransomware attack on you, you are responsible for the data. So there's two massive problems that we see today in the industry. It's one, all of us, even on this call, have way more SaaS applications in our organization than we think. And two, the majority of them absolutely have no protection. If we go back 4 or 5 years ago, no one thought that they had to protect Microsoft 365. No one thought that. They thought that Microsoft had to protect it. But as we see now, everyone now has a backup for M365. But guess what? That's just one critical application. What about GitHub? What about Slack? What about Zendesk? What about all the Atlassian services? What about those? Who is responsible for them? The reality is that we are all responsible for the SaaS applications that we use. I like to compare it to a parking garage. The SaaS itself, they're only responsible for keeping the lights on and making sure that you can park your car, right? For example, DocuSign, make sure that you can automatically transact, that you can have people sign, but DocuSign is not responsible for the data if you accidentally delete a signature or you delete a file. It applies to every single SaaS application. They are the garage. They are responsible for keeping it open, for keeping the lights on. But if your car, your data gets damaged, stolen, something happens to it, it is on you to be able to recover it. And it's not just Microsoft 365. It's every other critical SaaS application, not just within IT, but across HR, finance, marketing, sales. All of these SaaS applications used to live and exist as server and data center deployments. Now they are their own walled garden, and they require their own specialized backup and recovery. And this creates a massive problem because there are 3 core challenges that every single organization is going to face per SaaS application. So let's take an application like Jira. Atlassian Cloud came out about 5 years ago, and the majority of customers have now moved to the SaaS deployment of Jira. Now, on-prem, people would take VM snapshots, they would take care of business, have their offsite backups in place. When you go to Atlassian Cloud and when you go to their SaaS, you're only able to export data every 2 days manually. or you can find a way to script it and do a bulk export somewhere. But what happens when actually somebody deletes a project or an issue or an attachment or comment? You have to recover an entire instance, and that takes days, if not weeks. So when you think about all of these SaaS applications, you have to think about, what if one of my employees, what if data is corrupted? What if somebody accidentally or intentionally deletes data? How do I handle that? How do I go about recovering the data itself? We have to think about that across all SaaS applications. The next one is, what if there's an outage? But most importantly, what if there's a cyber attack? When we look at ransomware, one of the key targets of ransomware are SaaS applications because they're low-hanging fruit. Potentially, they might even have non-technical admins who aren't following best practices. So everybody here today who's using a SaaS application, you can face a ransomware attack. Not just a direct exploit on your organization and your application, but even a supply chain attack on the SaaS application as well. Do you have a plan to recover? If there's an outage, do you have a safe copy of your data outside the service as well? And the other very, very important one for any organization in the financial, the healthcare space, what is your compliance when it comes to SaaS? We know that in Europe, the NIS2 directive is going to start asking everyone to keep a backup offsite of their SaaS applications. But as you know, a healthcare organization, they're adopting SaaS, but they have to keep data on-prem for 7 years. How are you managing compliance? How are you meeting your retention, your residency, and your governance requirements? These are critical things that we have to be much more explicit about looking into when it comes to all of the SaaS applications. But here's the challenge that we face, and I call this the data resilience challenge. We know that ransomware is explicitly targeting SaaS applications. We know the amounts of attacks are increasing, the types and innovation in those attacks are also continuing to grow. And the majority of these attacks do result in some form of data loss for the end user. But the challenge that we see here, though, is that the majority of these applications do not have any third-party backup providers, especially in the enterprise space. And if you go right now and you go to the Gartner Magic Quadrant for backup and recovery, they show the top enterprise backup vendors. When you grab all of them together, except HYCU, you have 5 total SaaS applications that are supported in the aggregate. There are hundreds being used per organization in the enterprise, dozens, if not a couple hundred at the mid-size level. Something must change. And so what I want to recap here is there are 3 core problems that we're seeing. 1, the organization doesn't really have an awareness of how many SaaS applications are being in use by department. 2, there's not really an awareness of what is being protected, what has protection available. And 3, you have very minimal, true, tested, reliable enterprise backup options to protect these SaaS applications. So with that being said, instead of going through additional slides of how HYCU solves this problem, I actually want to show you exactly how we do this. Just confirming that you guys are able to see my demo screen.
It's got R graph, policies, targets.
Perfect. That's exactly what we want. So what we're seeing here is the HYCU platform. This is our service. This is the one place where people go to start protecting all of their applications. Now, before you actually start protecting, assigning backups, understanding your recovery mechanisms, you have to understand how many SaaS applications are actually running in your organization. So something that we've patented at HYCU is we have a discovery service. By the way, this is free for everybody on the call, that as long as you have Okta or as long as you have Azure Active Directory, we will be able to show you exactly how many SaaS applications are within your organization. How does that actually work? Well, you're seeing a live example of HYCU, our company, and how these works at HYCU. So think of this as your company. Think of these yellow nodes as a department in your organization. What we're able to do is start actually mapping and tagging and showing you all of the SaaS applications that belong to each department. So you can take a look, for example, at what are you using in sales and marketing. For example, we have Trello, we have Salesforce, we have Notion, we have Asana. What are we using from a content management perspective? Well, we're using Box. And what we start doing is actually start uncovering the more problematic departments and actually starting to show the full sprawl of SaaS applications in an organization. We show you this big ugly spaghetti monster because we actually want to show you the scope of all of the data sources that your organization has and how many of them actually don't have any native data protection options. So what we do is we give you an ability to organize it. And this is what I like to call March Madness mode, where we actually show you once again your company and your departments and start actually associating all of them together and show you exactly what you have within your digital estate. Now, showing how many SaaS applications is one thing, but actually exposing how many of them don't actually have native data protection is a step forward. So you're having a conversation with somebody on your team and you realize, for example, how important Zendesk is for your organization. And you realize that Zendesk is critical for your employee and customer experience. Well, did you guys know that when you use Zendesk as a SaaS, you do not have any self-service recovery capabilities? There's no way to automatically schedule backups, and you have no way to automatically point those backups into an offsite location to meet compliance. So you can start identifying not only the problem from a volume perspective, but actually start tagging your critical applications and then realizing which one of these do not have any native data protection. But just a quick hint, folks, the majority of these SaaS applications do not have mature recovery capabilities for the customer. So that's where HYCU comes in. One, we want to give you a free service so you can actually expose the problem and understand the scope of what you have to be able to protect within your organization. The next thing that we do is we actually, through our development platform, release dozens of SaaS support per month. So every single month, you're going to see 6 to 12 SaaS applications come out with new supported services. This applies, for example, to the Atlassian services, right? We have the broadest coverage of covering Atlassian. But it's not just about SaaS like Notion, Miro, or Salesforce, which we protect as well, but it's also cloud services. So think about AWS. Think about a modern application within AWS. It's not just about protecting EC2 instances. It's about protecting all of the services that belong to it that hold some type of configuration, some type of data or function. So with HYCU, not only are you able to protect something like EC2 or even S3 storage itself, but your databases like Dynamo and RDS, but even being able to protect things like identity access management, the roles, the policies that belong there. But I want to show you guys exactly what you're able to do here because look, anyone can perform a backup, but a recovery, a granular recovery is the part that's extremely difficult to do. So I want to give you an example of what our granular restore looks like across all of the services that we protect. Let's take Okta. Okta as a service is the keys to your kingdom. Most organizations are going to be leveraging either Azure AD or Okta. There is critical configurations within Okta that nobody's actually backing up. And they don't realize that they have to back it up until something bad happens. Now, what HYCU is able to help you do is one, within one click, you can assign a backup policy across any sort of SaaS application that we protect. But the most important piece is that we give you granular restore. For example, you accidentally delete critical configurations within Okta. For example, maybe something like your UI schema or a domain, policies, even at the user level, we allow you to restore that directly to production. But it's not just Okta, it's every single SaaS application that we support. We're able to offer you very granular restore function. So in case there's a corruption, a bug, an accidental deletion, I call these the oh shit moments, you're able to perform a restore function. And most importantly, you're able to manage it across all the places. So I noticed in one of the presentations, I believe it was Satori, really talking about the challenge that these organizations faced when it comes to protecting all of these databases, all these data sources. The same thing happens from a backup and recovery perspective. Every day you have new services that need to be backed up, but it's extremely difficult to be able to do it in a consolidated fashion. What HYCU does, it allows you to centralize all backup operations, all restore operations, and even visually show you your protection status across departments and those specific SaaS applications. So with that being said, this was just a small demo. We're offering a free assessment to any organization who is interested in this. And in this, you're going to have not a salesperson, but a customer engineer of ours focus and turn on our graph for free and show you exactly what your organization has and help you build a plan to start plugging away at those vulnerable applications that do not have any recovery mechanisms. So you can leverage this QR code, you register there, and you will have your own HYCU service for free that you can leverage our graph on unlimited. And you can also try and protect any of these SaaS applications that we support in our portfolio, from Okta to Salesforce, AWS, Google Cloud, you name it. So with that, I want to thank you all for your time. And Ron, I know we probably are on a schedule here, so we can move forward.